As Dr. Lowe mentioned, this morning's keynote session highlights Mr. Yang, Miss Linda Sarsour, and Mr. Gupta. We will start with a video from Mr. Andrew Yang. He does not require much of introduction, but he is. I'll just tell everyone who might not know about Mr. Yang. He's an American entrepreneur and politician. He's a son of immigrants from Taiwan, born and raised in the United States, and he attended Brown University and Columbia Law School. After law school, Yang worked at startups and nonprofit, and he became a prominent candidate in the 2020 Democratic Party presidential primaries. His campaign largely focused on responding to the rapid development of automation. His signature policy was freedom dividend, a universal basic income of $1,000 a month to every American adult as a response to job displacement by automation. Yang has been credited with popularizing the idea of universal basic income through his candidacy and activism. News outlets describe Yang as the most surprising candidate of 2020 election cycle, going from a relative unknown to a major competitor in the race. Yang qualified for and participated in 7 of the first 8 Democratic debates. His supporters, informally known as the Yang Gang, included several high-profile celebrities. Yang suspended his campaign in February 11, 2020, shortly after the New Hampshire primary. After his campaign ended, Yang joined CNN as a political commentator, announced the creation of political nonprofit organization Humanity Forward, and ran in the 2021 New York City Democratic mayoral primary. We have a short video from Mr. Andrew Yang.
Hello everyone, I'm Andrew Yang and welcome to We Belong. Thank you to the Asian American Unity Coalition for putting this event together, to SK Lowe for organizing, and to Sandy Chow for sponsoring. It's so important to bring Asian American activists together to let people know that we have to wake up politically. We do belong, this is our country, we're just as American as anyone else, and we have to make our voices heard. The most important way we can make our voices heard is by becoming more politically activated. The fact is that Asian Americans vote at lower levels, and we're the most underrepresented group of any community in the United States, bar none. And that's not right. We're here together to hopefully help change that, help support the next generation of activists and voters and people that are going to make sure that our community is represented at the appropriate levels in government, from the school board all the way up to, who knows, President of the United States. So have a wonderful time today. Please know that the future is in your hands. We have to make it work for us and ourselves. And the only way to do that is by gathering together and making sure that we're politically activated, motivated, and ready to enact the change that we want to see in the world. Thank you all so much. Have a great time today. We do belong.
We do belong, yes. Next, we have a very energetic, highly visible American political activist, Miss Linda Sarsour. She's an American political activist. She was co-chair of the 2017 Women's March, which I attended in Washington, D.C., and was so empowered by it. She was also the co-chair of the 2017 Women's March and 2017 Day Without a Woman, and 2019 Women's March as well. Ms. Sarsour is also a former executive of the Arab American Association of New York. She and her Women's March co-chairs were profiled in Times Magazine's 100 Most Influential People in 2017. A Muslim of Palestinian descent, Sarsour first gained attention for protesting police surveillance of American Muslims, later becoming involved in the civil rights issues such as police brutality, feminism, immigration policy, and mass incarceration. She has also organized Black Lives demonstrations and was the lead plaintiff in the suit challenging the legality of the ban. Her political activism has been praised by liberals and progressives all alike. It is an honor to have Ms. Sarsour from Texas by way of New York right now. Ms. Sarsour, good morning. Thank you so much for joining while you are doing these amazing, wonderful efforts.
Thank you so much. And I want to say peace and blessings be upon you all. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you to the Asian American Unity Coalition for having me here today. Excuse my uniform and excuse I'm absolutely exhausted. I'm talking to you from the state of Texas. I just came back from Del Rio supporting Haitian migrants at the border. And that's exactly what unity is to me. It's exactly what solidarity means to me. And for me, we can't have unity without solidarity and standing up for one another. So I am truly honored and blessed to be here with all of you today. You know, we have seen a rise in anti-Asian violence across this country. And what I want to say to all of you here today is I recognize that that's not new, that this is not the first time and maybe not the last time that our Asian American communities across the country will experience hate and discrimination and targeting by, white supremacists, by people who oppose our values and principles. You know, when I, as a Muslim American, have been an organizer now for 20 years since the horrific attacks of 9/11, I remember, organizing and understanding that this history of this nation has taught me that bad things can really happen. And when Donald Trump during the 2016 election said, we're going to ban Muslim immigration, we're going to close our borders. And I thought to myself, and everyone was really horrified by that concept, but people said that can't happen in America. We can't just ban people from coming here. And I know that we can because we've done it before to our Chinese community. And people forget that there was a federal piece of legislation, the Chinese Exclusion Act, that actually banned Chinese immigrants from coming to the United States of America. So I remember history teaches us so that we know how to move forward. We also know about the treatment that our Japanese American comrades have experienced in these United States of America, the internment of the Japanese Americans, which is why after the horrific attacks of 9/11, watching the ways in which Muslim American communities were targeted and some were rounded up, unfortunately, that was not a new scene in this country. And of course, we have not yet experienced the level that our Japanese American sisters and brothers have experienced, but we do understand what it means to be targeted, to be focused on just based on who we are. And for us as Muslim Americans, we were targeted for the faith that we follow. And knowing that our Asian American sisters and brothers, Chinese and or Japanese Americans have experienced the same level of trauma, of pain, of exclusion in a country that we do absolutely belong in. 2021 is the 150th anniversary of the largest mass lynchings in the United States of America. Oftentimes when we speak about lynchings, of course, they predominantly impacted Black people in the United States of America. But a lot of people don't understand how deep our history is around lynchings, that the largest mass lynching in America was of Chinese Americans in Los Angeles. And so that's also a deep part of our history. So this country has a very, very dark history when it comes to the treatment of Asian Americans. And for us as Muslim Americans, and remember, as part of our larger Muslim American community, we have members of our community who belong to the Asian American community. That our community is intersectional, it is diverse. And I want to tell you a little story before I conclude my remarks here today about what unity and solidarity looks like and how it got me to start thinking about how I really truly want to show up in this work that I do every day. A few years ago, I was giving a lecture at a university in the Midwest. And I was actually explaining to the young people, many of whom were Muslim students, trying to kind of root them in history, let them understand that, yes, bad things can happen in this country and bad things have happened in this country. And I talked to them about the Chinese Exclusion Act and specifically about Japanese internment and the rounding up of Japanese Americans and their children in internment camps in the United States of America. And at the end of the lecture, this young Muslim boy stood up and asked me a question. And he said, I want to know who those Americans were that lived in this country at the time of Japanese internment. Who were those people? He was so adamant and so passionate and so outraged and so confused. And he wanted to know who would live in this country and look around and see their Japanese American neighbors being literally dragged from their homes. They're literally taken from their homes. and with their children and put in camps on this US soil. And he wanted to know who those people were that watched that happen. And to be quite honest with you, in that moment at this university, I was so taken aback by his question, this young Muslim American that is listening to the same rhetoric, literally as if someone opened a playbook that was used during the time of Japanese internment and is now using them towards Muslims. When you think about the things that were said about Japanese Americans at that time, they are not to be trusted. They are incapable of being loyal to the United States of America, that they are the enemies within. And they were accused of being a community that is harmful and not part of the actual fabric of these United States of America. And so in that moment, when this young man asked me this question, I didn't really have an answer for him. And then days later in my office, I thought about this young man and his voice kept coming to me. And I said, I know who those people were. I know the people that lived during Japanese internment. Those people were the silent majority. And one of the things I've committed myself to is never, ever being part of the silent majority. I wrote a book this year. Actually, it came out last year during the pandemic, but last year all seems like 1 year to me. It's all mushed together. I wrote a book called We Are Not Here to Be Bystanders. And I truly believe that. And I hope that today what we get out of being in this convening together as you build space together, and hopefully one day we'll be in physical space together at this We Belong conference, that we commit to one another and say we will never be bystanders. We are not here to be bystanders, and that we show up for one another. And for me, when I talk about solidarity, I want you to really, truly understand what solidarity means to me. Solidarity for me is a verb. It's not a noun. It requires action. So if I'm in a community and I live in New York, as many of you know, and I'm seeing or hearing about anti-Asian violence in my community, it's not enough for me to say, I'm with you. I stand in solidarity with you. I need to show up for you. I need to be in your community. I need to show up to the vigils that your community is organizing. I need to provide support, resources, finances, whatever I can, and whatever we can as communities to ensure that the Asian American communities that many of us belong to, but are also a part of and are also our neighbors, actually truly feel our solidarity. We are in a very, very dangerous moment in this country. We really are. And we're coming up against another very important election. And I know we always say this. It always seems like it's an important election, but it is. We have voting rights on the line. Our communities have undocumented people who are been waiting for decades for a pathway to citizenship. So our immigration rights are on the line, and pathway to legalization is on the line. Our women's rights are on the line. I mean, there's so much right now on the line, and especially being at the Del Rio border and watching the influx of migrants who are coming to the United States and not finding the right infrastructure for them and to welcome them here is also something that is on the line. So thank you to all of you for having me here today. And I want you to know that your Palestinian Muslim American sister from Brooklyn, New York, and I also consider myself to be West Asian because Palestine is in West Asia, that I am always going to be in solidarity with you, and that you can call on me anytime for me to stand and use my big platform and my voice to stand with your community. So thank you again for having me here today.
Thank you, Ms. Sarsour. I do have your book, and I read it. Thank you so much for sharing your remarks with us. Next, we have Mr. S.K. Gupta, founder and managing director of Asian Corporate Directors Network Ascent Pinnacle. He successfully laid the groundwork for increasing the representation of Asian Americans in the U.S. public company boards. He has served on a wide range of boards of directors, including Sandia National Laboratories, Bay Area Council, San Jose Museum of Art, LEP, and APIA Scholars. Mr. Gupta retired from Lockheed Martin as the Vice President of Operations for Space Systems. During his 28 years at Lockheed Martin, his assignments ranged from sea to Star Wars and space programs, including the world's first stealth ship, the Sea Shadow. Since retirement from Lockheed Martin, he has devoted his time to help Asian American professionals achieve their full potential. He has published and presented papers on leadership, business, and technical subjects, a graduate of Marine Engineering College in India and the University of Michigan. He also holds an MBA from Seattle University. He is a recipient of many honors and awards, including Lockheed Corporation's Robert E. Gross Award as Engineer Scientist of the Year. He received the National Asian American Engineer of the Year Award in 2004 and was recipient of the prestigious Ellis Island Medal of Honor in 2010. We have a short video with Mr. Gupta.
Good morning. I want to start by thanking AEUC for organizing this National Civic Leadership Forum, The Power of Unity. Their call to action for full-scale civic engagement and to forge unity on our common goals among all diverse AAPI organizations resonates with where my mind and heart have been for the past 2 decades. I'm honored, flattered, and delighted to be invited to share some personal thoughts with you all. I also humbly ask for your assistance in helping other Asian Americans. We all need to help each other feel comfortable, for as one belongs, so do all of us. My wife always reminds me to speak slowly, as when I get excited and speak fast, my accent gets more pronounced. In any case, if you hear an accent, please remember that I didn't have one till I came to the US. I want to start my story from my graduation from my engineering college in India. Upon graduation, they wrote in my yearbook, "What's a guy like him doing in a place like this?" The implication was that I didn't belong. Fast forward 8 years later to University of Michigan, and I finally felt that I was somewhere that I belonged. The professors here tested me on what I had learned, versus in India, it was to discover what I hadn't learned. Both my wife and I felt that we had finally arrived in a country where we belonged. During my 48-year career, I changed industries, companies, functions, and geography, and I felt I belonged in my new country. And yet, like many of us, I too was told in the last few years to go back to your own country. So I too need affirmation after 41 years in the US that I too belong. During my working years, I discovered many barriers to my career. Some of the barriers were erected by others, and yet some that were erected by me personally, my background and my culture. Years back, I was told that I didn't need to give Asians or Hispanics the same pay raises as others, as they lived simpler lives and didn't need as much money. Obviously, they hadn't met my wife. I've often heard that the reason Asians are not in the leadership ranks is because they don't want to be leaders. I couldn't help but point out that I didn't see the Asian countries being led by European and American white males. Same applies to businesses. Toyota in Japan, Lenovo in China, and Tata in India come to mind. When I came to the US in 1980, I was often introduced and referred to as an East Indian. Many times, folks, especially ladies, would say, "I love your sing-song accent." Back then, Indians were still a novelty in the US. After graduation, working in Washington, D.C., and later in Washington State, we started hearing ourselves being referred to as Indian Americans. We also learned the difference between an American Indian and an Indian American, noun or adjective. Once I became a citizen, I just wanted to be an American. I didn't want any adjectives, not East Asian, not Indian American, and not South Asian. Just good old plain American. But that I soon discovered was wishful thinking. It dawned on me that you are not who you think you are, but rather who others see you as. In my late 30s, I discovered that I was classified as a minority. Having grown up in an homogeneous India, this was a new and strangely uncomfortable label. Now when I'm asked, "What is your nationality?" I reply, "American." Then they say, no, where are you from?" And I say, "California." I know what they want. They want to know my heritage, but have they ever thought of asking a white American that question? America is often referred to as a melting pot. If that was true, we would all be seen as equal and not need any adjectives to describe each other. What the US of A has really become is better described as a stir-fry dish in which every ingredient retains its form and taste and yet collectively is better or can be better than its parts. I was once told by my boss that I would never be promoted to vice president as I was not an alpha male. I thought about it and then asked him that if I'm not an alpha male, what am I? After some deliberation, the learned gentleman, a PhD from Purdue, said that I was a highly competent beta male. I would submit that description. A highly competent beta male applies to most Asians. Given his feedback, I learned a few new skills and identified the 3 cultural behaviors that I had to change. And I refer to them as the 3 rules that I had to learn. Although these rules were specifically for me, I would submit that they apply to many first-generation Asian Americans. Rule number 1, the only person in charge of my career is me. Speak up. We were taught in our native countries in Asia to work hard, work smart, and if it is meant to be, it will be. It is kismet, karma, fate, but not in the US of A. Here we need to learn that you have to drive your own career. You need to find your next assignment, promotion, or training. I learned to speak up. Rule number 2, the best way of making sure that you don't get something is by not asking for it. So ask. In other words, if you want something, a promotion, ask for it. However, Asians don't like to ask. We prefer to be asked. Even if we were starving, we would have to decline any offer of food at least twice before we could hesitantly say yes the 3rd time. Now in Asian countries, the offerer also knows that you're going to decline it twice, so they ask you the 3rd time. What happens in the US? How many times have you ever been asked twice? I learned to ask versus waiting to be asked. Rule number 3, pull is stronger than push, but no one pulls someone who's not pushing themselves. Raise your hand. In Asia, there are many phrases that are used to drive behavior. The nail that sticks out gets hammered down, Chinese. The bird that doesn't hide itself gets shot, Japanese. Don't sing your own praises like a parrot, my own mom in India. We were taught in Asia that being pushy is rude, and yet in this country, we recognize and reward the alpha male. I was told by an HR executive that Asian Americans don't want to be leaders as they are not knocking down his door to get promoted. We can't wait to be pulled up. We need to push ourselves to get there. I had discovered my bamboo ceiling, but overcome it. I hope that, like me, we all see the bamboo ceiling not as a barrier, but as a hurdle, an opportunity to take in our stride. The awakening of my Asian American identity happened around 2003. I had transferred back to a facility in California after over 6 years in Maryland and Colorado. I left here as a junior executive and returned as a senior one. Many of my previous colleagues and friends were still around. When they would see me, they would say, "Congratulations, one of us made it," or words to that effect. Initially, I honestly didn't get what they meant by "one of us made it." They were of different Asian heritages: Chinese, Japanese, Filipinos, Koreans, Indians, etc. So I sat down with my colleague and friend, the VP of Human Resources, to seek to understand. Dave was blunt. "Have you looked around yourself?" he asked. "You're the only vice president of Asian descent in this entire division of roughly 20,000 employees." He told me that whether I liked it or not, I was a role model for all Asian American employees. Dave helped me understand that although 13% of the local employee population at that time was of Asian heritage, less than 5% were in supervisory or management positions. This was an eye-opener for me. For decades, I was focused on my personal career: work hard, work smart, leverage opportunities, and progress. Now I was seeing myself as a member of a population that I had not even realized that I belonged to. I hosted a meeting of all Asian American supervisors and managers. No non-Asians were allowed. Planned for an hour, it lasted for over 2. For the first time, many shared their experiences with racial prejudices, denied opportunities, and yes, lack of role models. There was emotion as well as a few tears. For the first time in their career, they had a safe environment to voice their frustrations. I was both sad and mad at listening to the stories. When a corporation's chairman and CEO formed the Chairman's Diversity Council, the membership was well thought out. Women, African Americans, Hispanics, and Asian Americans were all included as council members. However, the 3 Asian American members were further subdivided by Filipino, Chinese, and Indian. We were not seen as one. The 3 of us soon concluded that we needed to speak with one voice as Asian Americans. My personal belief moved from not understanding the strength and value of all Asians being seen as one to now driving for them all to be seen as one. A very senior executive told me that as Asian Americans are not homogeneous, the corporation can't do much to assist them. My response: our languages may be different, but our cultural norms and values are the same. AAUC's vision is to gain equal citizenship for all AAPI to achieve our collective American dreams. We need to gather all Asian Americans together and speak with one voice that loudly proclaims we belong in this country. There is strength in numbers. It was the Immigration Act of 1965 that allowed us to emigrate legally to the US. At that time, there were only 800,000 Asians in this country. Today, there are over 20 million of us. Collectively, we, the Asian Americans, are just over 7% of the US population. However, the largest single group, people of Chinese heritage, is barely over 1%. Small numbers, even though we are growing rapidly. If we don't speak up as the 7%ers, no one will hear the voice of the 1%ers. This will only happen if the leaders and the boards of all the hundreds of different Asian American groups are willing to work together. My personal experience says that the biggest hurdle is our egos. We are willing to work together, but only if we lead and others follow us. This must change. We can't compete with each other and pull each other down like crabs. We must leverage each other to achieve our full potential and help close the opportunity gap for others. It is great to see the many different member organizations of AAUC, but where are the rest? Why are they not all members of the Unity Coalition? Let's work together to bring everyone to the Unity Coalition. Reminds me of an old story from the epic Mahabharata. There were 5 brothers called Pandavas who constantly competed with each other. One day, the guru gave them each a wooden stake to break. They all broke their sticks easily. He then took 5 sticks and tied them together, and then none of them could break the bunch. The simple moral of the story is that individually, we may feel challenged, but collectively, no one can break us. Let's look around us and draw strength from each other's success. To quote President Obama, our stories are singular, but our destiny is shared. It has been a long journey for me personally, but when an unknown Asian American recognizes you on the subway and quotes back to you what you said at a conference 5 or 6 years ago, you know that the journey was worth taking. If just one of my thoughts helps one of you move up in the corporate world, it will be nirvana for me. I'm proud to have been born in India, but I'm privileged to live in the US, where opportunities have no limits. From an Indian to an East Indian to an Indian American to a South Asian, and now proud to be an Asian American. And as we learned from the 5 Pandavas, there is strength in unity. We all belong. Thank you all.